Can you hear me? I don't want to blow you away, but I want you to hear me. Are you guys hearing me in the mic okay? All right. My name's Jenny McCausland. I'm the Assistant City Administrator here for City of Andover. This is Steve Anderson, our city engineer, and so I want to start by saying thank you for coming out. There are a lot of things you could have done with your night tonight, none of the least being watching basketball that might have been more palatable or enjoyable. But the basketball gods were with us on Sunday when they did not put K-State or KU on Thursday. I was really, really nervous about that. So thanks for that. And KU already got a win. So some of you happy about that? Okay, all right. Shocks won last night. Okay, all right. Everybody's still awake. That's a good start. If you didn't sign in, please do. What we want to know is who from the neighborhood we've had the opportunity to have this conversation with. So that's what we're really asking for on that sign-in. So if you didn't do that, and at least somebody from your property, please do that as you leave tonight. We're here tonight, obviously, to talk about water line extensions and the paving and drainage improvements for your neighborhood. And I want to start by being very clear. This is a conversation. This is not, we are putting in water lines or we are paving your street. Here you go. This is a conversation. What we need to gauge is where's their interest, and is there lots of interest in part of it? Is there no interest in any of it? Is it I'm interested, but this end of the price spectrum you're providing is way too high? The low end is palatable. We're just trying to gauge all of that. So I want to be very clear about that on the front end, that this is a conversation. And we intend this to keep going past tonight because not everyone from the neighborhood's here, and we know that. Also want to be respectful of your time. I don't think we're going to talk for much more than maybe a half hour, and then it's really going to be about the questions and comments that you all would like to say to us. Just to let you know, I hope it doesn't put anybody, make anybody nervous to speak, but we are recording tonight. That's why the gentleman in the back is here, because we wanted to have accurate notes and a reflection of tonight's meeting, but Steve and I both wanted to be engaged in the conversation and not taking those minutes. So we will have this available on YouTube. Typically, we get it up next day, and if you go to andoverks.com, there's a small icon that looks like a play button on the top of any of our pages. That'll take you straight to the Andover YouTube page, so you can check that there. My cards, Steve's cards, are in the back, so if you can't find that on the website, no problem. Give us a call, send us an email, and we can get that to you after the fact. Okay. The other thing about the business cards is that we know that it can be a little uncomfortable because there's probably a mix of opinions in the room tonight. I would suspect there are some people, based on the phone calls we've received to date, there's some that think this is a great idea. There's some that think it's a terrible idea, and your neighbor may have the opposite opinion of you, which means you may not want to stand up tonight and be very vocal if you're sitting next to your neighbor. And we recognize that. This is sensitive. We're talking about pocketbooks. That's sensitive. So if you are one who says, I really don't want to talk tonight, but I want you to know how I feel, those business cards are there so that you can contact us one-on-one and let us know later how you're feeling about things. Okay, so we're here tonight because we want to make these improvements, or we at least want to talk about making these improvements. Where does this come from? So as city staff, routinely we get questions or comments on why don't you, why haven't you, why aren't you? And so both from our city council point of view, past and present, we have some who believe every street inside the city of Andover should be paved and improved to curb and gutter standard. Some of that feeling is because not only are you in a city, but you're in a city in a metropolitan area, and that we should have an urban standard for our streets. But again, we have had inquiries from your neighborhood, and you may or may not hear those tonight, but we do have people calling and saying, I'd really like my road paved, or I'd really like my water connected to city water. And so when we start getting interest from the neighborhood, that's the point where as staff, we feel like we need to do some due diligence and find out if this is really a project that we should go ahead and investigate further, cost out, get engineering plans and designs. The other reason city council members may feel like this is important is not just that they think improved streets are important for a city in a metro area, but also we require that every new subdivision in the city of Andover has streets with curb and gutter and connects to water lines. Obviously, your neighborhood was one that was brought into the city, but we think you should have the opportunity to have those same improvements. So we want to give you the chance to tell us if that is something that, yes, you would like to join in or not. You might also be wondering, as you're looking at the map, you know, well, maybe, and I'm making this up, so I'm not suggesting this is the case, but someone on Daisy Lane is really interested in this, and I live over on Partridge, so why are you even talking to me? Just go do theirs. Generally, it's more fiscally and logistically responsible, get a better product if you do a little bit larger project than just one street or half a block. So that's why the scope of the project is the size that it is. Better pricing, and then certainly there's some logistics he'll speak to, but in terms of you don't want to put in your water line after you've put in your street, because now you're going to have to tear up the street. So there is a little bit of phasing and things of that nature that have to be taken into consideration. I'm sure you're all aware you got something in the mail last week, or you wouldn't be here tonight. In that was a summary. And the numbers in that obviously are not firm. It's a range. And you might even be going, that range isn't helpful, because if it's the low end, I'm kind of okay with it. And if it's the high end, I'm not okay with it at all. Please know we want to provide you with an idea, but we don't want to over-promise and under-deliver. That's what we don't want to do. We want to be as transparent as possible. And if after this process we hear support, we'll move forward with engineering designs and plans to get better, more clear numbers so that you have a better idea of what we're going to move forward with. Seemed like some numbers, some information was better than no information, because it's very hard to know if you're supportive or not if you have no idea what you would need to pay. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I think at this time it would be best if we have Steve kind of walk through the geographic neighborhood and the actual project, the technical side.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm not real used to these microphones, so if I drop it or something, please don't make too much fun of me. You got a map up here. You got this in the mail. One of the things I'd like to do is just walk you through the orientation, make sure that you all see what we're looking at. On this map, north is to your right. This is Allen Street on the west side of your neighborhood. This is Bales. That's the main entrance off of Andover Road down here. We've got Daisy Lane, and then the other streets in what we call the Bob White addition. The red line around here is an attempt to draw a benefit district around the area. And the blue lines represent the most paving that we could do in one large project. So that's kind of the scope geographically. I'm gonna talk a little bit about my past to illustrate a point. This is a blank page. If we would have sent a blank page and said, why don't you come down here and we'll talk about doing something, that doesn't do us much good. So what I'm doing is underscoring Jenny's point. We have to have a starting point for discussion. We actually talked about just looking at one or two blocks, but then we'd get into the scenario where, well, why didn't you come talk to me? So it's easier to back down from the overall scope. There's problems associated with that, but the reason we came up with the overall map was for the reasons Jenny mentioned, but it's a starting point for the discussion. It includes the entire neighborhood. It helps us flush out all the problems that are associated with drainage and things like that. So that's part of the reason for the overall map. So keeping in mind the geographic scope that we've sent to you, I'd like to walk you through the steps of the construction process. This is just a very simple picture of the nature of the roads in the neighborhood. And what I might add here is that your neighborhood was developed or platted at a time back in the 50s, around 1960 maybe, where the standards for development and public health for water wells and sewer systems was much lower. Right now, this type of development in some parts of the country would have a minimum of 5 acres. But what's happened is this has generated 1 acre lots, in some cases half acre lots, And so, and then the custom at the time was to put in basically a township road with a narrow right-of-way. So you have a 40-foot wide right-of-way and a 2-lane road that's, we can call it gravel or sand or whatever. I'm sure you know what the roads are like there. So we take this, and I'm going to walk through the steps, not in order that we build it, but you're going to see superimpositions of different projects. So we call this a suburban section. This section here is an urban section. This is what Jenny mentioned. We have a street policy that favors or encourages urban development, and it involves a full depth asphalt pavement. We usually use 7-inch minimum in our new subdivisions, curb and gutter, and you can see, whereas you had the old ditch flow before, now the water runs off the property and flows in the curb and gutter, and that's the essence of an urban section. What that means is the street has to be sunk down. And then, of course, when you start doing that, excuse me, you have problems with any existing utilities, and when you put in new utilities, you have to design for that. So that's the basically end result of the projects. The other two things that go with that would be a water line over here on the left side, and then we would have storm sewer inlets and storm sewer pipes that would serve to drain the water off the streets in lieu of open ditches. One thing I want you to notice on this drawing, you see what happens when we put in a standard width of a street. All of a sudden our water line and our curb inlet are out beyond the right-of-way that exists right now. So what we have to do, in addition to the improvements, we will have to acquire some more right-of-way and to bring the improvements up to standards. So if you would think of this as a 3-legged stool, there's a right-of-way concern. We need more right-of-way. The water line should go in first, because you don't want to put in curb and gutter and then tear it out to put in the water lines later, and then you finish with the street and the storm sewer. So that's the reason you have a price for the whole kit and caboodle, if you will. And I think that finishes up my part here for the scope of the project. We'll have a time of question and answers when we get done. You can come back to this if you want, but Jenny, I'm going to give this back to you.
So some of you may be feeling like I'm quite satisfied with my gravel road, or I'm quite satisfied with my water well, and so we did want to outline just some of the reasons that others in the past have wanted to make a change or an improvement to their neighborhoods in this way. The water lines obviously will enhance your fire protection. We hope no one ever needs to have that, but unfortunately it's one of those things that if you need it when it happened, and it's not something that will help you if we do it after the fact. Provide a safe water supply. Probably the best benefit when it comes to the water is it just transfers all of the responsibility from those individual water wells, which you maintain yourself and take care of and maintain and pay for, to the city at large. And so then it's our responsibility by way of City of Wichita, because that's who we work with for water, to make sure that it's safe, quality, clean drinking water. If there's a problem with the pipes and things like that, as far as conveying it to your property, that's all our problem, our responsibility. The curb and gutter streets, they definitely can improve redevelopment chances, and some of you may be feeling like, I don't want to redevelop my house, I like my land just like it is, and that's great. But if you think a little bit further into the future, there may come a time when you would like to do that, or you'd like to subdivide your lot. Maybe not, but that's always a possibility, that when you've got as much land as some of you have, that may be something that's of interest to you. It will definitely maintain your property value, and I would venture to say it will very likely increase your property value, in that a lot of people looking for homes in the ranges of some of your homes, when they're looking in town, they may or may not be very thrilled to buy a house on a dirt road. And so I would venture to guess that at a minimum it'll get you a little bit more exposure, you or someone down the road who may be wishing to sell that property at a later date. Again, and I think this is important, like the water lines, the maintenance is the city's responsibility. And right now you are paying through your property taxes for the street department to go out and remove snow from all the streets in the city, and they're not able to do that on your dirt road right now. They will be able to go out, though, on a curb and gutter improved road, clear that out. That makes life a little easier, a little more convenient for you. So You all have to personally decide how important that is, and obviously it isn't appropriate for anyone to tell you how important that is. But those are some things that we have heard as we've been petitioned by other neighborhoods in the past. Another point of view I would point out is certainly as you're thinking about the value of your property, you're probably thinking in maybe a 10 to 20, maybe 30-year future. The city is looking at the life of your home, probably 100-year or more life of most homes. And so anytime that we can have improved streets and better infrastructure, at some point those homes and that development will change over. That's just the nature of city planning and future planning, and so that's why we have a vested interest in having the improvements throughout the city. It just maintains the property value across the city. I think the reason everybody's looking at me with thoughtful eyebrows right now is the cost, and I love to hand this over to Steve for that conversation.
Thank you again. I'm Mr. Popular. I've got a last page here we're going to look at, which is basically the same information you have in your mailing. Before I do that, I want to talk about a couple of things. We've said, Jenny's mentioned that it's difficult to present the cost. It'd be nice to give you a more accurate cost, but two things factor into the vagueness of the costs. There's an engineering component, and then there's a legal or assessment component. Both of those together add up to a pretty wide range of assessments. So let me go back to the first page. You folks are familiar with your neighborhood, but over in this area we have the what I call the Bales tracts. These are 1 acre tracts, 135 feet by 300 and some. And then in this corner we have the Bob White tracts, which are more like 0.4 acres. So we have a wide discrepancy in area. We have a discrepancy in the amount of footage of the property that touches the street. And then we have corner lots. And quite frankly, corner lots stump me. It's hard to know how to fairly assess those. So if you live on a corner, you might have, in the case of the Bales tracts along Bale Street, 300 feet plus 100 feet, 400, 450 feet of frontage. And so why should you pay 4 times what a 100-foot lot would pay? On the other hand, those people with those 100-foot lots drive by the side of your yard. Do you see what I'm getting at? It's very difficult to come up with a fair way in your particular neighborhood. So that basically has given us a range of plus or minus 50 or more % on just how to assess them. The other thing is the engineering consideration. What we typically do, we either do an engineering study or we do an engineering set of plans, and when we get that done, we can pretty well tell what the cost is plus or minus 10%. The problem is, it takes about 10% of the project just to get to that number. Okay, so what our approach has been on this project is to give you a ballpark idea. Like Jenny said, if the low end is attractive or maybe doable and the high end's not, we want to hear from you. We're going to do a postcard survey when this is done and tell us where you're at with the range. On the other hand, if this whole thing is just way out of range, low end or high end both, we want to hear that. So that's kind of the reason for the vagueness of it. So now let's go back to the cost spreadsheet. Oh, Jenny, we can't even read this.
Would you like to have a copy?
Well, I'm sorry, I can't read your copy either. Let's put my glasses on. But I think I can remember the numbers. So for a minute, if you would, let's put a line in here. We've tried to simplify this as much as possible. So our water line cost is about $750,000. And without city council approval or confirmation, we've assumed 100% assessment like any new neighborhood would have. If you haven't had water before, those costs are assessed 100%. On the street side of it, we have a total of about $3 million, but the city council has, in some neighborhoods like yours, paid up to 50% of that because it's difficult to get a project going. So we're taking half of $3 million, coming up with $1.5 million and another $750,000 for the water line, which makes a little over $2 million for a total project cost. And like I say, those are very ballpark numbers. When we move to the assessments, I didn't list every lot in your neighborhood, as I'm sure you know, but we've pulled some lots out. The first lot up here would be a typical 1 acre Bales tract or Bales lot, 127 by 325 or so. That's a 1 acre lot. And then we have a range. I'm just going to go to the monthly. Help me out, Jenny. 200, 290 bucks. But you can see when we get to the corner lots, it goes up. 250 to 325, I think. 230. And I'm just illustrating you the difficulty of the corner lot. And again, we're being transparent and fully disclosing. If you own a corner lot, it's hard to get around a higher assessment than an interior lot. And then we go to Bob White. The Bob White lots are about square, 120 by 150. So we're not seeing too big a difference between corner lots there. There are a couple of residential tracts on the west side that are much larger, and then a couple of agricultural parcels that, other than saying the specials are very high, if we account for that, those are developable tracts and really kind of outside the range of the general neighborhood assessments. Here at the bottom, 4% interest in 20 years is how we came up with those monthly or annual numbers. And I think that ends the cost discussion for the moment. I'm okay with that.
You say on a corner lot, you got the assessment of that amount of money a month. What about, is that combined with the water and the sewer? I mean,
Okay, so right now you have a sewer assessment,
right, I understand.
and your question is, does
So
this?
you're putting in the water, you're putting in the streets, and on your sheet of paper, it's showing two different figures that it's gonna cost you per month.
That's a price range.
Right, but that's a price range of what it's gonna cost
Yes,
you
sir.
per month. So you're talking $500-600.
By the time you add the sewer in.
Right.
Okay, what the gentleman's saying is what I think you all know, and we know, that there are currently sewer assessments that run to 2022. It's a very important and relevant fact to this conversation, and we're not in disagreement or with anything that you say. It's a very good point.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
If I'm paying, let's say, $300 a month, how many years do I pay that?
Okay, so these numbers, those are based on 20 years, 4% interest.
I'll be dead in 20 years, more than likely.
Well, I mean, sir, I don't know what to say. I'm probably in the same boat. I get your point. We'll probably both be gone. You're right. Yeah.
Basically, what you're saying there with the assessments that I've got on my property, which I got a corner lot on Bales. The assessments point, well, you already got the sewer in, which that's what we need. I didn't agree with it, but we did need it. You know, I've lived with my water at $265 a month, $235 a month, $300 a month. I guarantee you I can replace my well every year. Here, here.
And the water prices have gone
Oh,
up.
yeah, because all the water lines that come up to the property.
Why don't we detour and talk about this?
The city only takes care from the main water line to the house, not to the house. I mean, from the main water line, your responsibility is all the way out to the main water line, correct or not correct?
Okay, so we're gonna address. You've raised. No, we're gonna have time for question and answer, but this is we'll just take a detour here and address your points. They're very well taken. So let's start with the sanitary sewer. You all are aware of the assessment until 2022.
I mean, I just put in a brand new sewer the year before, but septic system.
Okay.
And you did that. Yeah, and you know, the sewer, we needed it. I guarantee you we needed it. I don't need a.
Okay, so they're ganging up on me, so I gotta grope at some straws here. First of all, let's take let me bring in a third factor.
Yes, sir.
We didn't say much about the sewer, but we know, and you all know, the sewer was forced upon you some years ago. Okay? So here's the deal. The water and the street paving are not forcible. So let's get that out on the table. If you want a project, you can bring down a petition. If the city thought there was 50-50 interest and tried to start the project, they can do that without asking permission, but you can block it with a protest. So let's lay those cards on the table, and I'd like to distinguish, in my defense, if you will. I like your comments, because these questions we expected would come up. But what I'm saying is, if you don't want a street, you not only don't have to protest.
On the specials was gonna be more than what I had on my first payment at the house.
Right. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I just want you to make clear that whether you don't petition or the city starts and you petition against, it's not like the sewer job. So let's make that very clear. Okay? So legally, water and streets are completely different than sanitary sewer. So now let's talk about the timing and the total of the assessments. The time it takes to get one of these projects off the ground will be at least a year into design, probably a year and a half. It's going to take a construction season, the equivalent of a warm weather year. So now we're up to 2.5 years. If we started in 3 months, 2019, 20, 21, we're within a year of when the specials would pay out on the sewer. There are ways that if there was demand in the neighborhood for a project of some size and scope, to go ahead and build that now, but to defer the start of the specials until the sewer's paid for. So we're not interested in doubling up your specials.
Right, we're gonna pay special on the sewer no matter what.
Right, but we're not interested in adding to that cost.
What do you mean, you're adding to it for the street?
No, I'm saying it'll be between the time it takes to design, to build, and to levy the assessments. We're going to be 3 years out. So we don't anticipate that we would be adding to the assessments you got now. The time to assess would be after these are paid out. So does that answer your question on that?
Well, we're still paying for 3 at the end of that period. We're paying for water, sewer, and streets. We're gonna be paying all 3 of them for specials for so many years, even though the sewer's gonna be depreciated out before then. Am I correct?
Probably there's some difficulty on my end. What I'm saying is in 2022, those sewer specials end. I do not think there's any way between the time it takes to get the project going and the city council's concern for your area that the new specials for water and sewer would start before those sanitary sewer specials are paid off.
So what you're saying is we really don't know what that would be.
I don't know when it would be, other than we don't expect it to be sooner than the middle of 2022. Is there anybody else that has a question or confusion on these points? And I think you made one more question that I forgot. Is that right? Okay.
It was from the water main to the house.
That was it. That was it. So in Andover, we have a contract with the city of Wichita for the supply of water and for the maintenance of the water mains. We literally, we own the mains. Wichita is required to maintain them. When it comes to the service lines, if you got a meter, they could come out and tap that, run a pipe to your meter, set a meter. All that work is part of the city of Wichita.
That's our responsibility.
Yes.
To look into the house.
Yes, not to the house, to the meter.
It's like the sewer. I mean, we had to pay to run the line
Yes,
from the house to the sewer.
to the sewer, but in this case, you don't run it to the water main, you run it to the new meter on your property line. Yes, that portion on your property to connect your house is very much a homeowner's expense, and that's a good point to bring up. Very much so. Thank you. Optional to hook onto the water? I think it's optional. Let's take a note on that. The city has the right to make you hook onto the sewer, but I think water I'm not sure that you would have to hook on. The thing is, you would still be paying for the assessment for the main, but not getting the benefit of the water. Right, and by the way, there's about a $2,500 charge that is included in that estimate that is to the city of Wichita, not the city of Andover, just to get that meter in service. So that's included in the project.
Then, once the all said and done, we're still have a monthly water.
You will still have a monthly water bill. Yes, sir. If you hook up. Okay, we took a detour there. Detour over, or do we have some more questions on these points? Well, she's not,
No, I don't have anything. This is good.
She's putting it on you.
I'm putting it on you, because really all I had left to say was this would be a great time for us to shut up and you guys to talk, and you've done that. So let's keep going.
My name's Mark Brimer, my wife Sally. We live at 845 South Allen at the dead end. On the west side of Allen, there's 2 houses. On the east side of Allen, there's, I believe, 5. Now, we like our neighborhood the way it is. I mean, you call them improvements and progress, but. Oh, really? We like it, yeah. We live at the dead end down there on the west side of the road.
so you're the large tract.
Yeah, we got a big tract. But, thing is, and whatever the monthly payment would be, it's gonna be too much for me. I'm retired, live on a fixed income. I don't need any additional crap going out for this. We like it back there, you know. If I wanted to live in a suburban neighborhood with paved roads, curbs, water, all that crap, we'd move to it. But I don't like that. We like our neighborhood the way it is. You know, I get tired of, it was about 10 years ago we came down here and fought a zoning request from the developer that wanted to develop that land. And I think he probably stands to benefit the most from this project to go through. He gets his water and his everything in, then the land is more attractive. Well, we like it the way it is. We like the trees, you know, when we built those houses back in there, I've been there for 50 years, she lived there all her life. We built the houses pretty close to the road so that, you know, we would have a long driveway. Well, so you come in with your new, your roads and your curbs and all that crap, there goes my hedge trees, there goes all our trees, there goes, you know, wall. I'm totally opposed to it. We won't have a front yard left, and, you know, dusty roads, who cares? There you go. If you're not in favor, of this, stand up.
Okay, so you could, I mean, you, look, we'll take a show of hands or stand up or whatever you want. Here's what I want to say. I didn't think we were going to sing Kumbaya when this was over. But you just proved why we had this meeting, because we want to hear what you're saying. So, okay, so. All right, we got 2 amens up here, we got hand claps back here.
Anyway, like I said,
All right.
the one that stands to benefit the most from this is the guy that owns that land. I don't know, he's not behind all this crap.
He's only assessed for 75.
Because, you know, once he gets all that infrastructure in there, that land will be much more attractive to a
Okay.
developer.
So this,
That's my piece.
that's a good piece, and this brings me up. Let's review the ways we are trying to gain input. So we've had phone calls before. We've had a formal presentation, your input tonight. We'll stick around after the meeting. You can call us on our cards over the next week or 2, but the end result of this, we're just going to send out some postcards to everybody that lives there, and you can tell us where to go on that postcard if you want. Okay, but what we want to end up with is we want a packet of postcards that's better than the vote that you can take tonight if you want to take to our council. That's really what we want to know, but by golly, go ahead.
One thing I want to ask is like, if you have the majority of people on Allen Street or on Daisy Lane say they want it paved, and no one on Allen Street, will you go ahead and do Daisy Lane?
Okay, so that goes back, your question's very good, and we want to cover that, but it goes back to the starting point of the whole neighborhood. And when all the dust settles, if we find out that there is a street where somebody wants it paved, then we'll hunker down to that particular project and work with the people on that street to see what we can do. Okay? And so this approach is better than that approach. Because we're not excluding anybody and we're finding out where the support is.
I was upset when you brought in the street lights.
What's that?
I was upset when you brought in the street lights. You know, I get my telescope back there, and now I got this damn light, I'm not gonna get the gun out.
You're not going to hurt my feelings. I grew up in the country. You don't. Well, no, but just tell us what you want, and if nobody on Allen Street, I'll tell you what I think about priorities, and that doesn't mean any of this is going to go anywhere. But this main street coming in, this block, all of you use that. Okay, that's probably the priority in the whole.
And half of the people that live in Rose Hill.
Okay, I'm just saying that when you leave the big project and you start looking at the neighborhood, let me put it like this. Why would we go back and pave this and leave all these gravel roads? That doesn't make any sense.
We used to be able to turn left off of Allen Street to go into Wichita, and now we have to go out Bells so that we can turn left. So you guys know that.
Okay. I'm going to tell you something. It's going to get worse because there's a corridor study that's going to be wider.
I
And
was in one of the first houses that was in that. My mom and dad lived in the there was only 2 houses in that whole neighborhood when I lived there. And you guys have made so many changes that I couldn't understand. And so I think you need to listen to the people that live there. If you want to come in and change it after I die, that's fine.
all right, I'm guessing that Allen Street's not going to be paved for a year or two. But I'm just saying there's some ways to look at who gets the most use.
One point to bring out is closing Daisy Lane all the way up to the highway was not a city decision, it was the state and the highway department's decision.
Well, but they said that that was because you didn't turn left so many miles close to, a
How
stoplight.
many miles?
But I don't understand that because they did that, they did not do that on that, what's that road down there by the quick trip? 143rd, they didn't do that at
Okay.
143rd.
But Lynn makes a good point that there are some things that are beyond our control. And I will tell you that there is a corridor project plan like you see on into Wichita, and you can see that online on our website. That's probably going to be another 10 or 15 or 20 years, but there are more improvements planned related to Kellogg. So, okay.
I would just like to say that if this goes through, I mean, he's getting ready to retire, our income's gonna be limited. You will literally be forcing us out of our home.
Yeah.
Through 12 years that we
Okay, so
there's no way we can afford that kind of cost.
So I would invite you to put that in writing on a postcard and return it to us and make that point. Watch out for the postage. Okay, I'm going to stick with the left side first here.
So, how are we gonna deal with losing half of our front yard on Allen?
You know, I probably made a mistake on the drawing. This distance, the right-of-way distance across right now is 40 feet. The new distance would be 60 feet, but the difference here is only 10 feet.
Well, but you know, heaven forbid this goes through, but if you decide to put Allen, don't you have to have a cul-de-sac at the end of the road?
Yes, we will.
Okay, there goes.
But but the standard for pricing and presenting the project, the standard right-of-way is 10 feet off of each side.
I understand that, but that doesn't include the cul-de-sac.
No, no, sir, but
There's no room for cul-de-sac down there.
Well, there is.
There's our front yard.
you're on the south end of the east side of Bales. Well, I'm, no. We would have to come work with you on the acquisition of land, and that would be a different case, but there's a basis for the cul-de-sac. We're going to worry about that when we get a 51% vote for this project, and I don't think we're there. No, probably not. Okay, so your question.
I do have a question. I'm perfectly fine. We live on Allen. We will lose all our trees. They're right close to the road because of that. And the hedgerow will be gone, so there's all the shade down there. But the other thing is, there's all this land over there that's not developed. Why, if anybody's wanting it developed, why don't they wait till somebody comes in and it's got plans so that they have to pay part of it instead of going under after everybody else has paid for it?
I actually agree with you. I don't disagree. I think Allen is the lowest priority street in the whole neighborhood for the reasons you just mentioned. Okay, but we're here to present it and get your input. I'm hearing there's no support for Allen Street. You hearing different? All right. So are we done with this side, sir?
The lot west of Allen Street over there, that center section's owned by somebody, isn't it?
The 40 acres, big egg.
2 acres on this end of that, and 2 acres on this other end that are.
Yeah, one gentleman, you own the 2 acres on the south end.
Somebody owns that land in between there.
Right.
They have to pay part of that, don't they, because they own the land?
I believe that would be the fair thing to do. We have a policy that says the cost is shared equally on each side of the road.
Now, was that ever annexed into the city?
Yes, I believe so.
But if it's undeveloped, they're going to pay for it.
That depends on the assessment method.
Do they get the cul-de-sac?
Well, the cul-de-sac, I think, is at the end where 2 houses are. So, okay, go ahead.
Due to the right of way, our neighborhood was built back in the 50s with the roads this wide.
Right.
Now, if you come in and widen them, you're gonna take a lot of property.
10 feet, I said 10 feet on each side of the road, that's correct.
Plus, driveways won't be, my driveway on, where my garage is in the back, won't be big enough to park a car.
How far is your driveway off the road now? Do you know? The garage, I'm sorry.
Anyway, you're gonna put the one line right through the middle of my driveway, or next to the driveway. So,
Okay.
is there any kind of,
What?
Questions are not.
could be narrower?
Right.
If you do this, you don't have to make them.
Okay, so your question is, that my driveway's too close and I won't have room to park. I don't have an answer for these because we won't know that kind of stuff till we do an engineering survey. I think the question tonight is that, what do you think of the cost of the project and the scope? And if that's reason for you to oppose it, then that should be your response. But I don't have an engineering survey or a detailed answer for the trees, the driveways, all of that stuff. We're here to present a big picture cost and get big picture feedback. But your point's well taken.
Picture is, it was developed in the smaller size road.
Right.
You all of a sudden you're gonna come in and widen it because of new standards, but the neighborhood isn't new standard. It never will be. Because
Right.
all the houses were built off of the old standard.
Okay, all I can say to you is that in the past, the council supports the new standards and that's why they're willing to pay 50% of the cost. So we think. No. No, don't disagree. I don't disagree. So can I switch over here to this side? Okay, your turn.
Okay, so I have like 4 questions. I'm kind of trying to data gather, not get on either side. So my first question is, can you go back to the map? Can I see your pointer? So I know I live,
You just took over my meeting.
sorry. I live here, and I know the sewers ran through the back. Is there any reason why we have to put the water through in the easement in the front? Or can it go where we talked, where we had with the sewers?
It's most efficient in the front, and City of Wichita wants it accessible from a public road, so that is the custom, to put the water lines in the front.
Okay. Other question, since I do live on Daisy, if this goes through and we have to tear this road up, what is our access point during construction?
Well, I'd say drive through Lafayette Herman in about 3 months, because we're doing this kind of project on the east side of Andover Road between the Turnpike and the Red Bud Trail. And you literally have to jump through hoops to give people access. But This project is done routinely here and well, not here, but in Wichita. I've been around 30, 40 years, and it's difficult. There'll be some walking, but it's doable.
Okay, my other question is, urban standard being curb and gutter. Is there a precedence anywhere else in the city where it's paved but not curb and gutter? Yeah, basically similar to what right out here, right? That's what I was thinking of, but
So he's asking about standards. I think the urban standards go back to 2008 before I came here. Before that time, I know of one project called Highlands. It's east of Kellogg and just west of Andover Road. They're larger. Are you done? Oh. They're larger, not as large as yours, but it's a larger suburban development, about 25 years old, and that subdivision has 2-lane asphalt and open ditches. There are some people that aren't very happy with the ditch drainage, but you can drive through there and see what that looks like, and yes, there is a precedent, but it was before the policy went into effect. So we're running with policy tonight that this is what.
would there be, say, for example, other options? Is this our only options, I guess is the question. Is there another option to do something similar to that, say, pave the streets without curb and gutter, maybe improve the ditches? Because I assume that you're going to put in curb and gutter, you're going to have some sort of retention pond somewhere for the runoff.
I would prefer not to address the drainage in view of options without an engineering study at this meeting. I don't have the answer to that. What the gentleman is asking is there an option? And so I think Jenny and I would just say maybe to that. And so we feel like we as staff have a duty to present you with what the city council has preferred at the Mike and Main project and on the Lafayette Herman project that was built this year, the subdivision standards, and the city street policy. Now, that's our job tonight. If you want something else, you have the right to say that on your postcard, to talk to your councilman, to make some kind of appeal, write a letter, come to a meeting, whatever you want. So I'm not going to say that's off the table, but Jenny and I can't say yes to that as staff. That's a city council decision. And so I'm not going to say no, but you're welcome to proceed however you want if you want to pursue that option.
I think that feedback would be helpful. If that feeling is in the room, that feedback would be helpful so that we can gauge. Half of the group was interested, but not interested in this level of improvement. I think that would be very helpful. Anything quantifiable will be helpful at this point.
Want to keep that?
No.
I got one question on that.
Mr. Heath.
Right now, with the curb and gutter and all that, the city's paying for half.
That's what we're tentatively proposing, subject to council approval. But these costs and assessments are based on 50% city at large picking up.
What I'm getting at is if we went to pay streets only
Without
the curb and gutter, but pay streets only, leaving the ditches like they are now. What's the story on the city paying for or something?
I just can't answer that. Do you ever buy a used car? You start high and negotiate down, right?
Well, I'm just bringing that up. It's,
No, but we don't have a precedent for that.
I know.
I mean,
I think his point is very good. The standard and what the city council has decided should be the policy of the city of Andover is to have these improved streets with the curb and gutter, and as a way to help pay for that, they pay for 50%. Perhaps they would be willing to allow a standard that's not that level, but they may not be willing to incentivize it as much. And so then that kind of makes the decision something more for you all to consider. If you're going to pay roughly the same, but one you end up with a curb and gutter street and one you just end up with a pavement, that that changes the dynamic. So all of this you can see this is very fluid.
This whole thing stinks because, I mean, on Allen Street,
Okay, I'm saying I agree with you. But let me pose a scenario to you. If all of the houses on the east side of that drew up a petition and wanted to pay for 100% of that street, that's not likely, probably not realistic, but it's legally doable. We're here to find out the level of support. Your points, you're not gonna get any disagreement from Jenny and I. It doesn't make any sense to enhance a developable piece of ground, but we still have to throw it out there to see if the people on Allen Street have an interest. You don't. So, this lady over here,
Asking for the curb and gutter. in
what's
the
that?
neighborhood. How many residents in the addition are asking for curb and gutter?
We've got interest on streets. Okay, let me be clear, we've got interest. That interest is not defined, and so in response to that interest, we've taken the policy and past practice to create this scope and assessment level. This lady over here has been raising her hand. Go ahead, what's your?
I am concerned because in the past, with our experience out there, as you know, we were drug into the city, hijacked basically. After that, we had a real episode where they got a real good plan to try and redevelop our neighborhood and dug what we called affectionately the elephant pit. 6 foot around the properties, yes. But what I'm saying is I don't have a lot of confidence in that. Now my question is, I'm the owner of the Partridge Pond, where it floods every time it rains real heavy, and it comes across from the hotel. My thing is this. You gonna bring it up?
Well.
Might have to step back further.
When we purchased that property, the county engineer came out and gave us a very long lecture on what we could and couldn't do with that acreage there to divert any flow from that county stream because that it was against the law. And what I want to know is, with all that amount of water that comes through there when it rains heavily, and there's a lot of it, what are they planning to do? If they think that sewer system and a drainage in the curb is going to take care of that, they're crazy. It will flood us.
Okay, so you first just got me off the hook because I'm the city engineer, not the county engineer, okay? So I appreciate that. I appreciate that, but the lady has a very good point, and we're not here to micro-design the project, but what she's saying is that water comes down here, and you can see the pond, and you can kind of see the drainage way over here, and it continues. Everybody agrees? Okay, that's, in our cost estimating, that's what we call major drainage. It has a major impact on the neighborhood. It's different than street drainage, and it has to be dealt with, okay? As far as I'm concerned, I'll tell you that we're not ignorant of that problem. I can't speak for the county engineer, but until we do something for paving of Allen Street, there's probably not a big incentive to handle that drainage. It continues. And I'll tell you one other thing, what you don't see is, clear off the map, north of Kellogg, there's another 30 or 40 acres that drains through there. That's why your flows are so large. We've drawn the drainage map. You're absolutely right. But as far as a solution, right, but I'm telling you, there's really not a good incentive or way for the city to address that. You like it the way it is.
Right now, it hasn't flooded me out in almost 40, 55 years. So I would prefer that not to flood me out. Because they don't have
Okay.
stuff. It's got to come up on the curb on the L.
All right. So your concern and your history. Yeah, but your concern and your history are very legitimate. But we can't put in a new street on Allen Street until we address those very problems with open channels or pipes or whatever we need to. So we're not going to put in a curb and gutter street without addressing that. Okay? It is part of the creek. You're right. Well, to say tonight's probably not a good night to spend a lot of time is not a good answer to your question, But when you get inside the city limits, contrary to what the county engineer said, the laws are different in their ways of dealing with the drainage, and it may involve buying land on the city's part. Okay. If you go around town or look at an aerial map of Cornerstone, Crescent Lakes, anywhere in town, we put in detention ponds as part of a new development. Yeah, this was a requirement. That's a requirement for development of that property. So nobody can do anything to your property unless they fairly acquire the right to do that, okay? But we're getting really a long ways away from an urban standard. I'm just telling you, we are aware there are ways to deal with it, but we don't have the detail to be able to answer that, and won't until sometime a project comes up sometime.
It's fair to say drainage is addressed in the prices they have.
Yes,
Fixing drainage is addressed.
yes.
in the prices you have.
But there's no disagreement with what you're saying. You haven't said anything that's. Okay, but that was the county, not the city. Okay.
What are the standards for the distances between the street and the culvert and a house?
So going back from the edge of the street to the house on a rural street or on a curb and gutter street, or?
On Allen, at the end of Allen?
Oh, and you're thinking of the cul-de-sac.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're thinking of, if somebody were to put in curb and gutter and storm sewer, how would the pipe drain your end of the project? Is that, or are you talking about?
What are the standards for the distance between a resident and the edge of the street?
The setback, the building setback. Well, I really think in your neighborhood, and we've got a gentleman here that's an expert on planning and zoning, but there's a number in a book that I'm not gonna guess at tonight, but when you get into a developed neighborhood, sometimes you look at the average setback up and down the block, and that's what the setback is. Does that ring a bell? When you've got a bunch of buildings already built,
Well, then, there's no cul-de-sac there right now, and it's all gonna be curb and gutters, and how close can it be to a resident?
that will be, well, first of all, you can't make somebody move their house if you put in a
Well, I know
cul-de-sac.
you can't, and I just don't wanna have my bedroom right in the street.
Okay. But again, when we get interest in a curb and gutter street, we will have to sit down and go over the details of that plan with you. I'm still not hearing that 80% majority coming through. Okay, this side's been neglected. Are you guys done? For now. Okay, go ahead.
My name's, I don't need that. My name is Pam Cortez, and I live at 415 West Partridge.
You repeat the question.
Right. Pam Cortez, 415 West Partridge.
So if you go back to your picture of the roads that show the,
In here?
no, you're.
Oh, here, the middle one.
No, the drawing. Your
Right, I'll go back. I was just seeing where you,
Right, okay, you said that the 40 foot is the way it is right now, right?
the total between the two lines that say 40 foot.
Okay, so at that 40 foot row right there where that line is, to the left of that or to the right of that, is that property that we own?
Yes, this property you own, this would have to be acquired.
So it would be acquired, so they would come in and they would buy that extra 10 feet, or are they just gonna come in and just take it?
We can't come in and take it without paying for it. But the point is, and this is the first time this question's come up, so it's a very valid question. The way the laws run, you are entitled under the Constitution to just compensation, which means buying your land. You do have the right to donate it if you think you're in a tax bracket or you're a generous person that wants to donate. Most people take the cash, okay? But no, we can't come in and take your land. No, we can acquire it with money.
Well, as far as Mom and I are concerned, Mom and I live there, we're with Allen Street, and we're not for this.
Okay. Solidarity with Allen Street, not in favor of the project.
Right.
Okay,
I don't deny there's probably a couple people here that want the paved streets, but you said you've received calls about the maintenance. Is that maybe because the city isn't maintaining it the way they should be? I mean, this
I've
is
received,
a-
I personally received complaints on the maintenance from some of the callers. That's a subject that I can't address, but I can pass those concerns on. I've already spoken to our maintenance folks. And you're free to, we get complaints from all over town, all times of the years, about various problems, whether it's weeds and grass or ditch drainage or whatever. The only thing I would say in defense of our maintenance folks, had a pretty wet spell this winter, and when you soak it with ice and snow and freeze and thaw, it's a little difficult to maintain. That doesn't mean there's not room for improvement, but I will pass that on.
But that's what I'm just
They were
wondering.
out of rock, 'cause I called every day when the mud was 6 inches.
Yes,
They were out of rock.
that's the worst I've ever.
I'm just wondering if that's what brought this,
The out of,
received a lot of calls about it.
some of this goes back a couple of years. And then we're not always privy to the city council's input, because they get calls from citizens in different neighborhoods, and they don't pass those names on to us, but they sit behind the bench and say, we get a lot of complaints about bad roads all over town. So I can't tell you how much, but
I lived there when it was in the county, and the city does a better job of maintaining their streets than the county does.
The city does a better job than.
Back when we were a township.
I don't need it. Steve,
you don't need it.
thank you for bringing this subject up.
It's been a popular one, man.
Having a good discussion with everybody, because that's a better method than when we got annexed. Nick's already asked some of the questions I was gonna ask, but my understanding is that if you do put streets and curbs and guttering in, we have to do an improvement on our end of our driveway as well, or is that part of the street? That was a question.
Well, there's actually about three answers or three parts to that question. The typical practice on a new curb and gutter street in an older neighborhood, this distance from here to here is typically 14.5 feet, and the concrete driveways are put in as part of the assessed project. And then that cost is spread with the other specials. Sometimes we have to do some work back behind the driveway to make the grades match. And typically that cost is either assessed or paid for by the city at large or something. Sometimes we have to come back just to make the elevations work. But driveways are generally part of the project, unless you want a lot wider than you've got.
Next question I have is, we're talking about water. Some of us, like myself, are happy with my well water. I think it tastes better than Wichita water.
Yes.
But having a fire hydrant nearby could reduce our homeowner's insurance cost for fire.
I'd like to agree with you. I'm just not sure I can.
Well, I happen to know that they give you a certain rating based upon
They might.
the nearest fire hydrants. And I can also tell you, for the lack of fire hydrants, houses burned down. So I had it happen to one of my family members.
Okay, those 2 points, what your insurance company does, I can't address, but we have a rating in Andover for the entire city that's very, very good, and it recognizes that most of the town has better fire hydrants in service than you do. But when your local house burns and they don't have a fire hydrant, you're absolutely right, the risk is higher. Hopefully your homeowner's insurance covers that. But that's a very good distinction you made about water. When we put in an 8-inch water line, it's not because we need to run your shower and your dishwasher. It's for fire service.
Right. The last thing I have is, and you broached the subject a little bit about alternatives. And of course, you already have a standards policy that you set, but we can approach different alternatives, because while everybody could say, and I don't want to pay a whole lot of money extra in taxes, but I sure as heck get tired of the dust on the road. Can we come up with alternatives that are more economical to address those issues with the roads? I personally thought that asphalt, without the curbs and guttering, doing that?
We can come up with the alternatives and they cost less. They may not cost as much less as you might think. And I'm just saying Jenny and I can't commit to that. But if a group of you on a street want to do that, whether you sign a letter, come down here and talk to the city council, come in and have a meeting with staff and several owners, that's how you guys have to get the ball going. We can't do that. Back to the asphalt, there are places in town with what we call chip seal. They're the worst. You can't blade them like you can gravel, and you can't do anything but patch them like potholes. They are the worst maintenance nightmare there is, so we can't do the chip seal.
I was just going to follow up on the alternatives. We do have a city council workshop. We have that once a month, and this month's is this coming Monday. And one of the topics on there is our street policy. So if my opinion would be, so that Steve and I can walk into that meeting Monday night with as much information as possible, if that's the kind of information you're seeking, hey, yeah, I'm interested, I want to do something, I don't want to do this. If our business cards are back there, because you'll get that opportunity before you get the postcard, shoot us an email before Monday evening so that we can walk into that meeting and say, 15 people emailed us and said they are interested in doing something but not what we presented to them. I think that could be very helpful as we go into the conversation about the street policy and if revisions should be made or room for other options or alternatives. It's a timely, very timely topic.
And I'm, I guess I'm not opposed. You wanted to take a stand-up vote. I like raising my hand. It's more effort, but you guys can initiate a vote to say yes, no to this, that, and the other to Jenny and me, but we're concerned that a more accurate count would be to when we include everybody and let them. I think we want to go through these notes tonight. Probably take us a week to kind of do what we'd call a post-mortem. I'd like to, no pun intended. I think it might take a week or two, and then we'd probably leave a month before we get back all the postcards. They kind of trickle in. The postcards are allowed to be anonymous, so we don't ask your name. You can fill it in or your address, but you can. That's a good point. We can mail out a tabulation. I think for me, the trick is to try and keep a very simple questionnaire on a postcard without getting too complicated. And yet, you guys have raised concerns for almost an hour. There's a lot of things to consider. No, we won't. No, we'll put it in a city envelope, and we'll have a postcard filled out with our address on it. We won't have your address when it comes back. We don't use disappearing ink, I promise. No, we'll mail you the postcard. Yeah. When you mail it back, we won't have your address unless you really want to tell us. Yeah. Right. Let me phrase a question this way. I don't want to back you into a corner. So I'm not asking for support or opposition for a project. I would like to know how many of you would be more interested in a lower cost alternative. Would you say you're interested without committing to support? Would anybody want to venture? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 out of 50.
It's like, you know, you moved into that neighborhood where the road's dirty and dusty.
That's right.
So why are you wanting them improved? Why didn't you move into a neighborhood that was already paved?
Correct.
That's my feeling.
That's a good point.
If you want to change, then don't move. Don't ask the rest of us to sacrifice our paycheck for what you want.
Okay. This gentleman has another question.
No, that gentleman's had his hand up.
I'm sorry. Uh-oh, somebody's watching you better than I am. You want to talk?
Sure.
Okay.
My name's Rachel Hotalon. I live on Bale Street. It's the very first house as you come in. So we live very close to the road. So if you took all that, we basically would not be able to even park a car in the driveway, first of all. But my question is, actually, my second point before I ask my question is, I highly doubt that our property value is going to go up by this project. It's going to go down by the fact that it is going to be very difficult to sell our houses. And even if I put my house on the market tomorrow, I'm assuming we have to disclose that this is in the works. And who is going to want to buy a $100,000 house knowing that they're going to have to have $50,000 on top of that just for taxes? It's going to be impossible to sell. So you've just destroyed, even if I want to move, I can't. How am I going to do that? So I'm just saying, but my question is, Southwestern Bell is across the street, and they recently did improvements, a big gutter or something down in there when they redid all of their AT&T or Southwestern Bell, whatever you call it now. Yes. So are they included in that, in this? Because I didn't see them on any part of this. And because they have already put in a big culvert, does that mean that then you're not going to mess with them and you're going to even take more of my property?
No.
It has to be equal on both sides no matter what?
Well, I'm not willing to say the absolute, but in your particular case, they're out of St. Louis. They're liable for an assessment for whatever we do.
Okay.
They're another property owner.
Okay. Well, we're obviously not for it, but
Okay, did you all hear what she said? Okay, the point is, when it comes to talking about an improvement or a detraction from property values, we can't address that. That's something for you to decide. Okay? But there are a lot of people that petition for improvements thinking it'll help their property value. She disagrees. I support your opinion.
So we mostly talked about.
You comfortable? You want me to repeat your?
So we've mostly talked about paving the streets, but on the water end of it. So I noticed the city's paying 50% of the paving, but not the water improvement. I wondered if you could talk to that, and then also as far as reduced cost, if just doing the water portion without the paving would be an option?
Yes, the gentleman makes a couple of very good points. The participation, and again, this is tentative based on, we didn't go to the city council and say, do you approve this? I mean, they're off the hook politically. This is staff guessing what would fly before the city council. So we're going with the past couple of projects on participation on the paving, and we're going with the idea that new water lines would be 100% assessed. The only thing I can tell you is that if we put in a larger than 8-inch main, say a 12-inch main, which is probably likely in Bale Street, we routinely pay for the larger size in a main. That's not reflected in the cost of this, but that's probable for the single line going down Bale Street. Now, as far as the water line, I would like you all to listen to this very closely. Can the water line be done separately from and in advance of any street paving? Yes, it can. So if there's a desire for a water line project for one block here or there, all you have to remember is we have to start at Andover Road to run it back. So if you're on Allen Street, you probably don't want it anyway, but we have to run a quarter of a mile to get back there with water just to serve you. If we're in your place, we could run a water line there pretty easily.
Okay, the question on that, when we were forced into the sewer, we were actually given that option, and I don't think anybody, pursued that. So would it have been behooved us? No, for a water, to get water, when we were forced into sewer, we were actually given the option to.
I think that's
pursue a
correct.
water line. Would it have been
Yes, I think
cheaper then than it is now because they already had
Well,
Andover Road
it's
tore up?
like this.
I mean, looking back now.
It's like this. Cars were cheaper, houses were cheaper, gas. We deal with construction inflation just like any other commodity. So, yeah, it was cheaper, but dollar would buy more.
Yeah.
It's about that simple.
But to me, if people didn't want to do a water line when it was just that, then this cost is going to be more astronomical than just doing water.
It'll be higher because of construction inflation. What I think your point is that you feel like if it didn't go then, it probably won't go now. But to his point, if there was a desire for an improvement for a block close to Andover Road, the water line could go independently of the paving.
And it's not on top of the sewer special we currently pay, which that would have been two on top of each other.
Yes, it would be staggered, you're right.
Now, if they just go in and put the water in, are they still gonna take a 45-foot easement?
We'd need easement down one side of the street. There's just not enough room, and we don't want to put that water line where a street's going to go someday, maybe. So,
Okay.
so we would want, you just don't want to put your water lines under the streets for maintenance reasons and connection reasons. We don't have any sidewalk in the project. So, okay, we're working our way back up.
I live on Parker Road,
Okay.
and what side of the street would you take on? What side of the street?
Okay, there's 10 feet on each side of the street.
I
So
have a gas line right in front of my house. What do you do about that?
okay, so you're talking about the main running, not the water line to the meter on your house.
All I know is that I have a gas line right in front of my house.
It runs along the street, not to your house.
How far it runs.
Okay, there's gas mains in your neighborhood. You can see the meters by the houses. We know that. And so one of the things we deal with in any type of project is where are those, and are they in the way of what we want to do? So on the project we're just starting now, across on the east side of Andover Road between the turnpike and the trail, the gas company was in there for several weeks relocating their lines out of our way. And so that's a construction problem, but we have a way of dealing with that.
So you've already been working in our area? No.
No, I just drove down and saw gas meters by the houses. That's the extent of my investigation. But no doubt you're right. Yes, sir.
Again, kind of like Nick, more from a curiosity standpoint, as I look at that, once the lines are put in, you have an easement there, but that returns to grass, is that correct? So is that
So
more?
You're talking about this stretch here?
Right.
Okay, so the common term in a city is, we call that the parking. It's typically about 15 feet wide, and yes, it is grass in most cases, other than the driveways and inlets and stuff like that.
So you would have more, basically that more yard than you had when you started.
No.
No.
No, the old road, we're figuring 20 feet or a little bit more here, and this is like 30 feet. So it's going to be 5 foot or so farther out than the edge of the road now.
I was curious because I have some trees that are very close to the road, so I was curious how long.
Okay, I'm seeing the hands slow down, and it's 7:20. Jenny and I are prepared to be here till midnight, but whenever you guys get done, we'll finish. Okay, what can I?
Okay, now, on which side of the street would that main water line along Bales go? Would it
Don't
go
know.
to the south side?
I don't know. We have to do a survey, we have to locate the utilities, and then we make a plan where they all fit in the best manner it can be on either side. That's all I can tell you. Sorry I can't get more specific. Okay, are we winding down, or we got more? We will stay here, so if you want to come up, I may want to sit down a little bit, but if you want to come up and ask questions, we can do that. But if you want to keep discussing as a group, we're here for that too.
You might have answered this already, but when you send these postcards out and you get those back, we just have a few people say, yeah, we're for this or whatever. Does that kill it, or does it keep going for something else?
Well, you guys have asked for, and we will send the tabulation, so you'll know the total number and the responses. We will give that information to the council as well. We did this on the Bicentennial Waterline project. There was opposition to that. I don't think we had about 90 properties there. You guys are more like 50 or so. I don't suppose we got 50% back, but that's a pretty good sample set. And I would expect something like that from your neighborhood. I would expect to get 25 or 30 postcards, but not all.
What's the percentage receipts?
Pardon?
What's the percentage that it receipts?
Wait a minute. Are you gonna go get 10 postcards and stuff? Y'all heard that, right? I'm sorry.
Is there a percentage where it keeps going, or is it a percentage where it's just done?
No, it's a report to the council, and I mean, if you're 10%, I don't think they're gonna do anything. If you start getting up around 50% out of, in favor of something, and maybe you only got 50%, I think they'll take a look at that and say, well, there's some interest here. But there's no rules. This is an informal survey. It's not a legal petition. Yes, sir. You should have sat in the front. You should have sat in the front.
Well, they always do that. No,
You're right.
forget what I was going to ask.
I got the same problem, so
Memory lapse.
I'll bet if I walk back up the front, you'll
Yeah,
remember.
I did have a question. So you said the city, if they put in a water line, they'll go to 12-inch.
On the one main street,
Yeah, to go down Bales.
yes, probably.
Is there a reason they would go to 12-inch other than so that somebody on the west side can go ahead and develop that?
Okay, his question is about basically city planning and long-range planning. He's asking, what's the reason for that? Yes, we do put in oversized water lines and sewer lines to serve land beyond the immediate project. And we've done that all over town. We've done it from the sewer plant into town. And to not do that would be a very poor use of city dollars. So yes, you're right.
So that property on the west is assessed at a lot lower value than what ours are, and the water's already gonna be there for them, and, the street's gonna be curved and guttered, and that means that, they're probably gonna eliminate that, drainage canal from the pond, and like she was saying, where the hell that water will go? I mean, it'll go on a paved road.
In my basement.
Oh, okay.
You guys are going to get me out of a job because you've got this whole project figured out. Yeah, you got everything figured out, and where the water's going to go. You don't need a city engineer, so don't tell my bosses that. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm not going to. If you have a particular interest in a particular block, what I'd like you to do is talk to all your neighbors and see if you have a group consensus. That's what I'd like you to do. If you want to volunteer it, that's up to you.
And I would also reiterate, if you do have a specific situation that you really want to be considered, feel free to call or email Steve or I so that we relay that specific situation too. We can definitely do that. Our cards are at the back, and we'd be happy to relay that specific information, so we'll include that.
If this makes it all the way to the city council, will we get an alert on that?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. But I will promote that we have meetings the first and last Tuesday of every single month. It's a really fun time. You can join us in this room, 7 o'clock. No food and beverage like there is tonight, but
But what guarantee do we have that if all of us send a card in, that you're going to recognize it as ours?
that we're, I'm sorry?
I know it is, but it's your money in my hand that I don't have.
We'll recognize the full results of the survey. I think that's what she's asking. Isn't that right?
So,
If everybody in this room sent a card, what guarantee do we have that you guys are going to acknowledge that all of our cards made it to you?
we're going to send you the results. I think that's a great idea. I'm glad whoever brought that up. So I think that's a good way for you to see how we've presented the information is we're going to share it with you as well. But we kind of go back to that beginning piece. This is different than the sewer project. This is not a, hey, we want to tell you this is coming. This is, we want to know how you're feeling about this. City would have substantial investment in this as well. And if there's no interest from the residents to do it, then it's not a worthwhile project for anybody.
Then why did they want to do it in the first place?
Because we've been asked about it and we have to do our due diligence to look into those things.
Outside,
I don't know. Can you? I hope so. I have no vested interest in if you guys pave your road or if you get water line. I really don't.
Maybe an outsider had a part to it.
I think the guy that owns that land is, made a few phone calls, hey, this is wrong, so-and-so, and,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, have people been complaining about the roads, or have they been complaining about the quality of the maintenance of the roads?
I would say a little bit of both. We hear about dust, we hear about the maintenance, and then the water, we hear about wanting a desire for city water. So I would say it's fair to say all of the above.
We have lived here 30 years or more, and we have put up with it, and we've learned to go slow on our streets, which deters all the death.
Absolutely. No, that would.
Put up with it all this time, so why now?
Like the woman said in the back of the room, though, some people might be saying, why didn't we do the water line 30, 20 years ago? In 20 years, someone will probably say, why didn't they do that in 2019? Yes, sir.
I live on Feather Place, and I want to say this clearly and distinctly so that my house isn't egged. If anybody's got bad streets, it's us. Because whenever it rains, it comes out of the lake, drains across Mrs. Kubich's land there, and floods her land. We sell rapid rides on inner tubes when it goes through because it's like a river, and then with Kathy, it turns in, the Trevolt River turns into Parsons Lake. Half the street, now that it's been raining, and since we were taken over by the city and removed from Bruno Township, half the street is in my yard. I have asked for 3 or 4 years for them to come, not to do anything, just get the street out of my yard. Some of you are complaining that the street is going to be by your front door. The street is already by my front door. But nobody comes and cleans out that area. Nobody has fixed the drainage. So I get the water coming down from the east and goes into my property, coming from the north, coming into my property. And literally it's buried the pipe underneath my driveway. So now it's a horrible situation. The water that we have, the well water, is putrid. And we have to bring water in because the water is so sulfur infested, right? 40 years we've lived with that, and if I didn't like it, I could move. But I am not going to vote for something that's going to cause everybody else's economy to go up. I'm getting ready to retire next year. I've already figured it out, my budget. I can live with some of the situations that are there because we've learned to live with it. But I am not going to vote for somebody that's going to affect everybody else's property and everybody else's budget and literally to cause some people to move. When they put the sewers in, there were 3 families that had to move because they couldn't afford the sewer. All I'm saying is, this is something that's going to affect all of us. This is something, and we're not talking about $50 extra a month. We're talking about things that will cause people not to get their medicine. I'm not trying to be melodramatic. I work in the health-related field, and I know what medicine costs. All of these things, simply so that I can have a nice road and I can have good water. If I want that, I'll go somewhere else. But I liked living there. I was born and raised kind of in that area. So if it's going to mean that a decision that all I want is for the city to come out and engineer the road better so it doesn't flow up to my front door. But anyway, I think that has to be taken into consideration, that whatever decision we make, it's going to affect all of our budget. Not Andover's, us.
Okay. one more comment, and then we're going to close so those of you who want to go home can. But like Steve committed, I'm not tucking my kids in tonight. I'm going to hang out with you guys. So come talk to us after this last comment if you have more to say.
I wanted to make it clear that the road behind us, Feather Place, was a good road until the city, or was the county, came in and tore it up completely when they did the elephant pit. They ruined that road. They never put it back together right. It's been a disaster ever since then, and now that the city owns it, somebody needs to put it back right. It's not a matter of the fact we can't handle it, it's because they damaged it. And if you look back at the old newspaper articles for Andover, you'll see the stories on it. There was a bunch of school buses sitting in their yard because they slid off in the mud. They didn't put the rock back. They need rock on that road. They need it fixed. And it's not a new road we need. Just fix what they did. It's not a new road.
Okay. Thank you all for your attendance, your interest, and participation. Let us know if you have any comments. Thank you.
And they said yes. So the thing that happens in the Kansas state statutes is if you vacate land, it reverts back, reversionary rights revert back to the original property owner, which would have been USD 385. So we approached them and simply asked them, hey,